Hello, hello. Welcome. Today is Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. My name is Deshaun Carter. Dan Vega is at Spring IO. I'm not jealous at all, not at all, because today is the Spring Boot 3.5 release party. So I'm going to bring on my good friend, Phil Webb, and let's jump right into it. Phil.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you? I'm all right.
This is good stuff. I'm ready. We've been waiting for this for a long time. My automation has already kicked off. I saw the releases come for 3.4.6, I believe, kicked off, and I've got pipelines moving, a handful, a few dozen, maybe 100 repositories being upgraded automatically, but I don't have the 3.5 ones yet.
This is it's supposed to be a release party, but it's going to be it's a pre-release party because we had like one last minute regression, unfortunately, that we're trying to fix just before we release. And,
you know what? From all of us, I want to say thank you for not releasing it with the regression.
Yeah,
thank you for holding
it's a bad one.
Yeah, thank you for holding it.
Yeah, it should still be done today. And
that's wonderful.
You know, the team is split across Europe and the US. So,
across the world.
I'm the US contingent at the moment, so the Europe's going to bed, so I'm going to be doing the 3.5 release probably.
Fantastic. So the releases, it's happening. It's in the pipes.
Yeah. It's just waiting for one green build, and then as soon as this is done, I'm going to kick it off.
Now, we've been pre-partying for this release for a while because we've had release candidates, we've had milestones, so we've been pre-partying with this for a while. But the process, I'm always amazed at how in-depth the build process is for spring releases. All of the iterations, all the combinations of all the things, it's not a small task. There's only a few 20 million-ish developers depending on these releases to work.
It's
taste of what's going on. How big is this release? How long does it take?
So Spring Boot alone, our build, I think, takes about an hour and a bit from start to finish because we have so many integration tests. But I want to say we're the last in the line, but we're not the last in the line because we've got Spring Cloud and Spring AI after us. But we're the kind of near the end. So for us to release, a whole lot of other stuff has to go smoothly beforehand. So there's Rob Winch did a great job of putting together this release train process. So now all the projects kind of release at this set cadence. So I think the process started about 2 weeks ago with Framework, but obviously there's like a domino of things that have to happen, and each release has to go smoothly so that we can release. So we should be okay. Most of our process is pretty automated. So once we've got everything in place, it's just a case of clicking the button and waiting.
Now, what are the special things about 3.5? Rumor is this is the last minor of the 3.x.
Yeah, so 3.5 has been an interesting release because we've been juggling quite a lot of things simultaneously. So it's the last in the 3x line, and that makes it interesting because there's bits that we want to get in. You know, it would be a shame if that wasn't in because this release is going to live longer than most other ones because the last in the sort of major line we support for 6 months longer in open source, I believe, but even longer than that if you're a commercial customer.
And this is a new change, right? This is a fairly recent change within the last 6 months that was announced. Right?
Yeah, I think some of the I get confused with what dates we have, but I think some of the commercial customers now get very, very long support for it. So we know that this is going to live for a while.
I think that it's from release, it's 6 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
LTS support.
Yeah, if you're a commercial customer.
Yeah, for our commercial customers, which is amazing, right?
Yeah. But it kind of puts you in this awkward position because you're like, well, I want to get this stuff in so that this is complete. But at the same time, you don't want to put anything in that's potentially a mistake because then you've got to live with it for 6 years and you can't easily fix it. So it's been a lot of kind of trying to finish things off, add the last, bits of features that we had half completed, and then at the same time we're trying to work on, because we're at this 6-month release cadence now.
Thank you.
We've got a major release coming out in 6 months, and we kind of feel like we've got more than 6 months work to do. So we've started the 4.0 process kind of earlier. And we swore we'd never do this again when we were doing the 3.0 release, but we've done it again. So we've been trying to do some work on 4.0 branches that aren't yet like in main, but they're on the public repo, but they're not kind of that visible yet. So we've been sort of juggling 3.5, 4.0, and we've actually got 2 4.0 branches because we're doing some major work there as well. So we've got one for Spring IO to use and one for some major work that we've got going on. So there's like a lot of juggling with this last 6 months.
With each release, there's always some themes that go along with it. I think that's what we call them, themes. Like there's some main point. These are the main topics that we're trying to address. Yeah. What are the main themes of Spring Boot 3.5?
I wouldn't say there are any other than finishing it, if that makes sense. Like it's a lot of loose ends being tied up mostly. So things like, I was trying to make a look through the release notes. Things like we have some new builders that we put in 3.4 that let you create and configure REST clients easily, the underlying infrastructure for them. We always had a way of doing kind of basic configuration, but now you can configure, like if you're using the Apache one, there's an Apache specific builder and you can kind of configure all the details of everything. And we were missing like a Webflux version of that. So that's gone into 3.5. What else is there? Like SSL service connections. I think we started, SSL work has been like a big theme in 3, and trying to finish that stuff off in 3.5. Yeah, there's just like lots of loose ends, I think. Structured logging was another one that was kind of like,
maybe my favorite is structured logging.
Yeah, so that's had like what have we done there? There's been some mistakes that we made with our understanding of the way that the Elasticsearch spec was done. So we've had to fix that. And then also some support for processing stack traces, because a lot of people were kind of liking the structured logging work, but then finding that their stack traces were kind of blowing up the system that was storing them, because it was so much data. And a lot of the other previous like solutions that existed allow you to do like reverse stack trace, so that like the most important thing is at the top and then you can truncate it. So we've been trying to, another case of just finishing off what we started in 3.4.
That's powerful stuff. And around the structured logging, and remember, it was the Elastic, it was Logstash, and the other one was Gelf?
Gelf, yeah. And you can write your own if you want to.
And you can write your own.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But every one of these releases, I think I have a favorite feature. There's like the thing that I'm most excited about, and the structured logging. That's definitely been, my favorite.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting feature, because it's logging in general is difficult because it happens so early. So most of the time with Spring, you can kind of like offer escape hatches with, you can plug in your own bean, and you can take control of things that way. But structured logging, it has to start before the application context has even like come into existence. So it's much harder to offer these escape hatches, in familiar ways with structured logging, which is a little unfortunate.
One of the other things that comes to mind, I remember a year ago watching Jurgen on stage at Spring IO talking about bean initialization for about an hour, and thinking of all the things. Right? There's these use cases where our customers had thousands of beans that were initializing, and it was taking a lot of time. We also got some new bean initialization configs, some hooks some changes, didn't we, in 3.5?
I think,
Work, but
yeah. I mean, you'd have to. One of the other advantages of Spring Boot is that we get to pick up everyone else's work and take credit for it. So there may be some like framework changes that you kind of pick up.
Fantastic. What else is top of mind on Spring Boot 3.5?
Let me go through the release notes because I did make some notes. Okay, I'll tell you one interesting thing that we've just did yesterday. Which is, it turns out that we're kind of like internet famous at the moment, and not necessarily for a good way.
Okay, this sounds interesting.
It looks like, I don't know if you've seen this thing about the Signal clone being hacked and a load of messages being...
No.
Okay, so there's some Signal clone has been hacked, and it turns out the back end, it looks like they may have been using a Spring Boot application and accidentally misconfigured it to expose the heap dump endpoint, which is like a super powerful endpoint that lets you debug stuff. But if you're not very careful, you can
let other people debug stuff,
leak very sensitive stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, one thing we did yesterday was we changed the default for that so that it's now, it was never exposed, right? But you could easily, like if you said, I want all the endpoints,
which I do all the time.
Yeah, you know, if you're doing demos and stuff. So like there's two now that don't happen automatically. One is the shutdown endpoint, which has always been the case, and now heap dump is also, you have to set another property, you know, like I really know what I'm doing. please expose the secrets.
Okay. That's interesting. And we got that was the new one that came in yesterday?
Yeah, I mean it was like a 2-line change.
Yep.
And it really, you know, if you've configured your app correctly, you shouldn't be having this thing exposed. You need to know what you're doing with these kind of things. But it was just another kind of like, let's try and stop people from making that mistake, or at least make it harder for them to make that mistake.
Pink Emma says, it's okay. ChatGPT knows how to configure it for me. What else? Let's just hop through the release notes.
All right. What else did I get? I got ECS structured logging we spoke about. So that was
the fix where we had logger.level and we needed it to be logger with a
so it turns out that we did like, you know, foo.bar.baz or whatever. And it turns out in the JSON, what it should be is foo, you know, nested JSON structure bar, nested JSON structure baz. So not a particularly easy fix to make, actually, it turns out, because we've got our own structured logging, like I said before, is kind of happens early, but also has got a problem in that we don't want to depend on any particular JSON library for it. So we've written our own, like, very simple kind of JSON writer. It doesn't need to do the, you know, it's not like it needs to parse, it just needs to write out JSON. Okay. So of course we had to make some changes to that in order to be able to do these kind of nested structures. So not as straightforward as it would have been if we were using like a proper JSON library.
And that it was working for a lot of cases, but it wasn't following the spec. So it was so some other places.
It's another one of these where the community really helped because they know these tools better than we do. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that it's a kind of common misconfiguration, if you like, or common mistake that people make. So depending on the back end you're using, sometimes they will accept it and sometimes they won't. So the spec says, you know, do this. But if you happen to do the other thing, it's like 50-50 whether it will work. So we had to really fix it for to increase the support.
So speaking of community, just to remind everybody, the Spring team is smaller than everybody thinks. It's always smaller than what everybody thinks. If we go and ask a customer how many people are on the Spring team, they're saying hundreds, thousands. The Spring team is not that big. So for the ones that get paid by Broadcom, that are working at Broadcom and are fully hired on to the Spring team. Now the community that's contributing. There's tons of contributions coming. It is open source, of course. On a given release, though, and I think on this one in particular, a lot of the issues, a lot of the things that go into release aren't like, Phil, I think we should add this. It's somebody that's coming from the community that says, oh, I ran into this. I could really use this. I see what you're doing here. Could we add this one thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was a classic example where, we thought the feature was done. We're not going to touch it again. And we are not running production apps that are logging in that format. So we wouldn't have found the issue. But when someone points out our mistake, it's it's good to fix it.
Fantastic. Another piece is I lean in. It took a while for me to understand the value of doing it this way. But when you run into something, there's value to the Spring team. If you've found something that doesn't work, should they just ignore it and assume it'll get fixed in the next release? Or maybe should they open up an issue? Maybe should they raise their hand and say, hey, this isn't working right? Which one do you prefer?
It depends on my mood on the day. Yeah.
Understood.
I guess I like to know about the issues, but sometimes it takes a while for us to fix them.
Yeah, that's maybe I'm reaching a little bit, but I feel like that's also been a big theme on Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3.x. There's been a lot of work in closing a bunch of old issues. There's been a lot of work of pruning the backlog and cleaning things up, bringing things forward, or getting rid of issues that were open, that were fixed, and nobody did that work to realize, oh, wait, that's already been fixed.
Yeah, or something that's like just too exotic and too much effort to actually fix. And, is it really an issue? Those kind of things.
Yeah. Hey, that just seems like a consistent theme over the last several releases.
Yeah,
so
I think it naturally happens at the end of a kind of major line, because you've got a I don't know how other teams organize it, but in Boot we've got these kind of buckets, and there's like a 3.5.x bucket and a 3.3.x bucket, and you're like, well, we're not going to do any more releases, so we're going to have to move these things somewhere. So that's a natural time when you tend to close them or fix them.
On the topic of how other teams do it, I can say from working with our customers in our community, I see a lot of organizations, a lot of teams very proud that they are following kind of the Spring team way. I see a lot of teams that, where they can see a lot of our pipelines, they can see a lot of how we're building things, and they are proud to kind of follow that lead. And when we talk to them, they're like, oh, we're doing it the same way as the Spring team. So of course it's right. Do you ever take pride in the way that you're doing things? Do you ever get that feedback? Hey, we're doing it just like you.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's interesting that you say the Spring way. And like, broadly speaking, I think all the teams are aligned, but when you get into the weeds, different teams have different approaches. So it's interesting that there is no Spring way as such. Like, if you look at, for instance, if you look at Framework, you'll find all their code is like manually formatted. If you look at Boot, all our code is like automatically formatted. Little things like that, but we both take pride in the way that the code is formatted, but it's like a different approach. Yep. And the same with the bugs. Sometimes, for instance, Boot tends to fix the earliest maintained branch and then merge forward, whereas Framework tends to do backports. So it's just little differences. It's kind of interesting, and each team does what works for them. And I don't think you can, in my opinion, like with all software teams, it's kind of a bit of a balance act. I don't think you can kind of mandate that a high performing team should do something this way. All you can do is like say, this works for us, and if you want to adopt it, fine. And some things people do adopt and some things they don't.
I think I had the same thought the last time when we did the Spring Boot 3.4 release party. There are things that, as a community member, I would love to hear about. I would love, maybe at Spring 1, that's happening not too far in the future here, it would be cool for me to hear the differences. This is how Spring Framework does it. This is how Spring Boot does it. This is how Spring Cloud. It would be really neat for me to understand the differences and that there's more than one way, which there always is. It would be a cool session for me.
It might be a bit in the weeds because they tend to, I mean, I think they tend to be minor technical differences rather than, something fundamental. Like I think most of the teams, it's like a debate versus Gradle or Maven. Like at the end of the day, as long as you get a jar out the end, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. From there may be reasons why one team prefers one thing over another, but I don't know. It's I think as long as the kind of philosophy is the same, then it's generally fine.
Fantastic.
I mean, one thing we do that I think I am pleased about, and a lot of the other teams have adopted, is we try and automate away arguments. Like, so we have a lot of check style rules and things like that just help with the, like, should you put this when you're accessing a private variable, or should you do that? And it's not that people have a strong opinion one way or another particularly. It's just that they don't know. So I really like the fact that, especially with contributions, because we have a lot of these rules in place, when stuff comes in, it kind of matches the style, which is nice. I am pleased with how much of that we've been able to put into the code base over the years.
Fantastic. Let's get back to the release notes. What's next on our list?
I had filter and servlet annotations to register them. So I don't know whether people use this very often. A lot of people work at Spring MVC level, controllers and stuff like that. Some people work at the kind of raw servlet level, and Spring Boot allows you to register like servlets and filters and stuff as beans, and you can just do @bean and then a servlet and it works. But if you look at like the servlet spec, when you register them, you can define extra things like which paths does this map to, or with a filter, which servlets does it apply to. And there's been this filter registration bean thing in Boot for a while that allows you to kind of configure all that stuff. But it's always been a bit like annoying that you have to, like, at some point you can register a servlet, and other points you have to use this registration bean thing to do it because you want to configure something extra. It's not really very springy. So there's now annotations, so you can declare like a bean method that's a servlet and then add this annotation to define the extra configuration things, which makes it a bit nicer to use.
I've seen a demo and that does look slick.
Yeah.
Any of these annotations that allow me to throw away code and I can still understand it by looking at it, that's springy.
It's I know it's another case of like a feature that just was nice to, the last sort of part of that area, that was nice to just get in and be done.
High value stuff.
Wonderful. Good. I'm going to carry on down my list then. Env imports. This was a community request. You can do in your application properties or application YAML, you can have spring.config.import, I think is the name of the property, and you can refer to other things. Normally those other things are like another properties file. But the actual infrastructure that backs it is quite flexible. And Spring Cloud uses it, and various other projects use it. And one of the ones that we've added in this release is you can now refer to an environment variable and say, import the contents of this environment variable as if it was a properties file. So that means you can have one environment variable with a bunch of stuff in it and then import that, which is, quite useful.
And the example that Moritz gave yesterday was if you're doing Kubernetes and you want your config to go along with your release, instead of having all that config in a map somewhere in some other thing that you've got to manage, you can have this right along with your one deployment YAML. You can have this little configuration that says, hey, here's my environment, and it has all the properties in it. That's it took me a while to figure out where the value line was, but then
same with us, because someone raised the issue and we were like, nah, and then they kind of came back and said, no, look, this is, and we were like, okay, you know, that what's that person trying the drink where they sort of go,
Yep, it took me a little bit, and also it's just a different approach, right? It's a different approach to how you want to do things. I like to have my config version separately from my app because I might roll through 3 different configurations for one version of the app. But in this case, maybe that's not always the same. Maybe if I do make a configuration that reflects a different version, a different state, and you want to have that mapped. So I get it.
I was pleased with the one thing that was really nice is it sometimes you put in an abstraction and you're not quite 100% sure about it, but this turned out to be like, oh, this is really easy to plug in this feature because we've already got all the groundwork in place. So it was nice to have like another proof that was a good idea in the first place.
And this is just at the Spring Boot level. We get this abstraction where we can pull in these configs, and I don't need anything extra.
No,
it'll work.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I was in the conversation yesterday, I was jumping, or maybe Tuesday, I was going through my head, like, I don't need Spring Cloud Kubernetes to do this, right? I can do this exact same thing, even on my laptop when I'm developing. I can say, hey, yep, here's my properties.
Yeah.
And there's lots of power there. It's flexible. It's a flexibility thing. So
yeah, that's good. What else have I got here? Stack tracing, I think we spoke about. So stack trace processing, being able to kind of reverse them and truncate them.
Right, that's the big one there is like, I got this 80-line stack trace and I got to go through all of it to find out the root cause.
Yeah, that's the biggest. I mean, it's kind of fascinating when you look at the way that Java decided to do the stack trace stuff. It's kind of like it makes sense, but it kind of doesn't. The number of times that we get like people pasting the top bit of the stack trace and the bit we want is the bottom bit.
Exactly. Yep.
So the kind of reverse one makes a lot of sense, especially if you combine it with like reverse and truncate, because then you're most likely to still have enough useful information in that top bit to let you like get to the cause of the problem.
There was another piece that Moritz described earlier this week around the aggregation. It's going to do some like, hey, this has been repeated this many times.
Oh, yeah, it's been a while since I looked at that feature.
It was like I don't remember if it was on an Accident, but yeah, along with this structured logging, we also have some other improvements in the logging where it's going to keep track of how many times this certain log was repeated, and you get that as a part of your structured logging. I don't remember the specifics, but yeah, there's a lot of really cool little things in there that when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's going to be valuable, especially when you're one of the orgs, one of the enterprises that they are sending so much log data to Elastic, for example, that that's a significant part of their IT budget is the amount. And any improvement that you can do, not just in the amount of data that you're sending, but also how easy it is to parse and find, that's where all of this structured logging and this additional metrics on repeatable stuff, that's where that becomes really valuable.
Yeah, that was another one that the structured logging feature kind of went in, and we got some early feedback about things that were missing. I think this was one of the ones that we didn't get into 3.4, but we'd had feedback on it already. But like a lot of good kind of results came out of the fact that people were kind of trying to use it for real and like reporting things that didn't quite work with it.
Yeah. Now we've had the ability to do structured logging. There's been plugins where we could, format our logs, but it was an add-on. It was outside of the release train.
Yeah.
We've had this ability for a long time. I want to say even back on Spring Boot 1.x, we had the ability. There was easily available libraries that allowed us to do that, and we leveraged those. the cool thing is, and I'm going to make a little leap here. The cool thing is we've started to bring that into our umbrella, into that supported stack where now we can do it and we get community feedback. We get a better supported version of it. And the other thing I'm going to throw into that bucket is gRPC. Right? This is another recent addition, GA of Spring's gRPC support.
Yeah.
So I put those kind of the same thing. We had an option that was, it had, there's a community that's using it with Spring, but now we're in this new place where we kind of got a better supported option.
Yeah, I think if you can if the one that we've provided is good enough for you, then it's going to work with like whatever logging framework you've got. So mostly it's like Logback or Log4j2. And then if you wanted structured logging, there were solutions for both of those things, but you kind of had to wire them in and do your own thing. But they were quite powerful, so there's a lot of features there and you're still welcome to use those. I think the advantage for a lot of what we try and do is if we can cover kind of 80-90% of your use case and we can do it consistently, then there's a lot of value there. Like if 90% of the users can use structured logging and it works out the box regardless of what framework they're using, and they don't have to kind of Google or Stack Overflow or Chat GPT, how do I configure this thing? That's like our sweet spot.
Last one on the logging. We also have this group, Spring application group or Spring group name. So we can kind of group our logs. If I've got region 1 over in hyperscaler 1, I can say, hey, this is the part of region 1. That's where these logs are coming from. So when I aggregate them into my Elastic or other, when I aggregate them, I can see like where are these logs coming from easier at a higher level. So not just structured logging, but we've also given now another layer of groupability, of categorization.
And we've got correlation IDs in there as well if you want that. So that's kind of cool.
That sounds fantastic. But we got that with Spring Boot 3, right? The correlation IDs.
I can't remember when we added it. It's definitely been improved over the years. I think it may have been. We may have had like the base feature in 3, but it wasn't in the console logging very well. And then I think like somewhere in like 3.2 maybe we fixed the formatting, because it's another one of these ones that seems easy, but it's actually quite hard. You need. We wanted to have like the logs consistent, so we need to like. If you haven't got a correlation ID, we want to put like a spacer in so that the logs don't end up sort of weaving all over the place. So it actually wasn't as easy as it sounded.
Oh, was that the hard part?
Yeah, because you need to know, you don't need to just know, do I have a correlation ID or not? You need to know, could I potentially have a correlation ID in the future? Because, the logging starts normally before you've got a correlation ID because no request has hit you yet. So you need to kind of like, you don't want the logs to suddenly be like going down, in a nice compact way, and then suddenly a correlation ID comes in and they bump across. That's not great, because you can't then parse on the particular column number. So it sounds simple, but sometimes these things aren't as simple as they look.
Fantastic. What's next on our list?
The HTTP connector stuff that I think we've already briefly spoken about. The HTTP connector builder, I think, is the name of the interface. There's a REST. Now I do get confused with the names. HTTP client, I think, is the other. There's like a blocking and non-blocking, like typical, Spring, where we've got like 2 stacks for the blocking and non-blocking, and the blocking one, a builder was added, I think last release or maybe the release previously, and now there's a Webflux equivalent. I'm quite happy with it because it lets you really customize everything about whatever library you're using, and that is not particularly easy to do, because it's easy to have an abstraction like Spring offers this basic abstraction, and then it's easy to have like configuration that applies to everything, like, so if you've got, say you've got like a HTTP client and you've got Apache HTTP components, and maybe you've got Jetty or some Reactor Netty or whatever. It's easy to kind of have a configuration property that you can apply to all of them. But when you get into the weeds, there's a lot of details that, this library lets you do this thing, but this other library doesn't. So how do you offer a general way of configuring that stuff? It's not particularly easy. So the APIs, I'm quite pleased with it. There's a like an interface, and then there's static methods on that interface, and you get like more specific implementations returned. So if you do Jetty, you get like Jetty specific things that you can configure.
I'm laughing inside because I think about Spring Data, for example, and I always joke about how, like, in a room full of Spring developers, nobody ever freaks out about, oh, you're going to take away my Oracle and switch me to Postgres, or vice versa. Like, I don't care, because the 99% of things that I do, it's covered by Spring Data. Whatever driver I throw in there, it's going to be fine. It's that other 1%, like, how do you configure it? And then I'm laughing because, like, maybe over the last 20 years, the Spring team has ran into this once or twice before, how to provide access to that extra 1% that's not available across the board. Maybe we've run into that, and maybe you've learned a thing or two.
I think it's like a typical software engineering problem, like you put in these abstractions to make your life easier, and they generally do, but then you find that, like, there's this 1%, 2% case where you've got to, like, somehow unwind what you did to give you, like, the raw power. It's like it's constantly a balancing act between, trying to over abstract things and then, like, wind it back a little bit.
And that, again, I've never felt trapped by the Spring API. I've always felt like I had an option. Like, oh, hey, maybe Spring Data is not going to work. I always felt like I had a way to go straight to the driver. I can still do my thing. I never felt trapped. I always felt like having Spring Project included was great. But I never felt like trapped or limited or hindered in any way, because I always had that escape hatch. I always had that way out to get to what I needed to get to in that 1% use case.
And you could do this before we put in the new builders. Like, it was possible to configure your own. Mm-hmm. It was just
made it easier.
Difficult. So it's trying to get that balance right of, this turned out to be, I think if it was something that, like, not many people needed to do, not very often, we'd just have left it as it is. And, okay, here's what you get out of the box. And if you want to do your own thing, it's time for you to add 200 lines of your own Java code to do it. But this was kind of it seemed like slightly, 70% of people were fine, but that 30% wanted to do something a bit more in depth, and offering them some way of doing that was kind of useful.
I think that is a good transition to the SSL improvements, the security improvements, right? A lot of times the greater community is not doing MTLS everywhere inside of their org, but we do have a large group of our customers that are heavily, regulated. They have this high compliance. They need to do SSL between everything, whether it's on the same machine or not. They have to have these things in place, which brings us to, we've made a lot of improvements around SSL. We added SSL bundles, I think, in 3.3, which made it easier for us to do a lot of the maintenance around certificates and rotation. And also, we also added the group names, where we can have more than one domain being served on SSL. It's a super powerful stuff. And now in 3.5, we added some SSL by default, SSL configuration for some of the services.
So it's another case of us putting in an abstraction and then like needing to do a bit more. So we did a lot of this came out of, I can't remember the technology. It might have been Elasticsearch, or it might have been Kafka, I don't know, but we have test containers and Docker Compose support. And in order to do that, we created this like new abstraction called service connections that was like, this is a way of describing how to connect to the thing that you want to connect to. And then our properties-based support that's out the box uses it, and test containers like uses it because obviously you don't put in a URL if you're using test containers. You kind of start the container and then build the URL from the port that it's used. And one of the things that was missing from that service connection abstraction was SSL support. So this is a case of us having to kind of, first of all, put the fix into the abstraction and then retrofit that so that we can have SSL support like for all these various technologies.
Fantastic. I think Kafka was at the top of the list, or that's the one that I hear being discussed the most.
Yeah, there was one that didn't offer an easy way of not having a secure connection, and then that was the problem. Yeah, like a lot of them, it's fine when you start the test containers to kind of like, it's not HTTPS, who cares?
Yeah.
But one of them didn't have an easy way of doing that, so that was kind of the driving force behind it.
And I feel like there was a long list of where we made SSL enabled for these backing services. Like Kafka, Elastic, I think Redis was on the list.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of them.
Neo4j.
Probably the one we haven't yet done is JDBC drivers. They turn out to be quite hard to do because it depends on the driver. So each driver's got its own.
Each driver has a different way of configuring.
Yeah, so trying to offer like a uniform way of doing it is quite hard, and we haven't really nailed that one yet.
That's good.
I mean, you can do it, but it's just we're not holding your hand quite so much.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going. What's next? And by the way, Dan is in. Dan, hello, in Barcelona.
No, hello.
Things are going well.
I think the last thing on my list was build pack support. We are upgraded to Noble, which is like another one that I think if you look at the commit, it's probably like a few lines of code, but a huge amount of effort, mainly on other teams actually, to support that.
One that we get to take credit for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we get to do one line and put it in our release notes, but the build pack team had to do a crazy amount of work to kind of support that. So it was another one that we can take credit for, but
the build packs that we use, that we support, that we get from Paketo, the ones that we reference in our Spring Boot plugins for Maven and Gradle, those build packs are now baselined on Ubuntu's Noble, which I believe is 2404.
I don't know the version, but I know it's an LTS release.
LTS release, the newest LTS release.
And it was another one where if we didn't get it in, we know we're going to support, this line for a long time. And it just felt like it would be really, really nice if we were on the latest LTS release.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Yeah. And I'm a big fan. I played around that space. I'm a big fan of all the stuff. In Spring Boot 3.4, our Paketo build pack for Java was the first multi-architecture support.
At last.
Right? Oh yeah. I'm very aware. Before that, I had a little one-off that was getting used and leveraged, and I was very happy. Maybe that was the story that I talk about with open source, is like, hey, I built this thing, I put it on GitHub. Oh, but wait, now people are using it, right? I felt that around my little multi-architecture build pack, but now it's here. And not only do we have this multi-architecture build pack, but now it's on the latest LTS. And in this whole journey, we get release candidates. I've been spoiled by Spring Boot, by Spring Framework, by the Spring projects, because I get release candidates, I get milestones. And those milestones are oftentimes looking at the next Java version, right? When Java 24 comes out, we're ready to support it.
Yeah.
Right. The Spring Stack is ready to support it. When Java 25 comes out, we're ready to support it. And one of the things that I'm hoping for, that I'll push for in build packs, is that maybe we start to get build pack versions that are looking ahead, that are looking at, I don't know what the latest Ubuntu version is, but it'd be nice to be able to try out the newer Ubuntu versions with a build pack along with everything else that I'm doing because I want to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah,
And
it's kind of fun though, because you really, it shouldn't make a lot of difference. Like, build packs, they're supposed to take away the pain. So although it's one of these things where if we do our job right, no one even notices.
This is real.
Which is like funny because you spend so much time like getting this stuff to work, and then if you've done your job well, nobody cares. People only care if things go wrong.
Yep. Have you discussed Spring AI yet? We haven't discussed Spring AI yet. Thanks for asking the question. Spring AI 1.0 release. We're going to have a show specifically around Spring AI. Stay tuned for that. We have somebody else say it. The conditional on property is now repeatable. And we changed the way that conditional on property is set up. Didn't we?
There's a conditional on Boolean property thing that helps if you've got like Booleans now. There's a whole bunch of like minor changes that I haven't gone through. There's like every time we try to do these kind of little paper cut changes, there's like miscellaneous in the release notes. And if you look at M1, it's like 3 lines. And by the time we get to the release, I'm like, God, there's a lot there. Maybe we should have pulled these out to a section. But if you want to like read the release notes, because they kind of cover all of those kind of small enhancements. And there's also a list of deprecations, and there's also a useful section at the start that will help you if you're doing an upgrade, that kind of hopefully tells you the most likely pain points you're going to hit. So the release notes on the wiki are really worth reading.
100%. So yeah, if you have Spring AI problems, tune back in for our episode where we celebrate the Spring AI 1.0
I'm
release.
sure it's just a coincidence that they released when Spring IO Barcelona was out, but it's a pretty good one.
Maybe there is some pressure. But yeah, the thing is, regarding Spring AI, it's been in development for a long time. It's got tons of momentum, tons of contributions, and that whole space continues to change so fast. But I've been working with customers that have been using Spring AI in production, right? I don't know how much that means, but in production since the 0.8 release, or snapshots, right? Where they were taking things and they were building things that were of value. Yeah, for well over a year and a half. And yeah, this was just time to like, hey, let's draw a line in the sand. We could continue making changes. Yeah, all the time, but putting a line in the sand and saying, hey, this is nice. We have a nice rounded out API. We're doing good things. I'm happy for it. A lot of people are celebrating.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting project because Spring, I think, often tends to be a little bit like see where the landscape lands, and then we put the abstractions in and make it easy for people to use APIs in the kind of springy way. But that space moves so fast that like I can't even keep up with it. 1 minute there's new terms, new terminologies, different ways of doing things. So it's I think I'd be tearing my hair out if I was working on Spring AI. Like, they've done what now?
Well, Phil, I think that's one of the things that we try to do here with the Spring Office Hours. One of the things that I'm trying to do is I know that it's hard to keep up with the ecosystem. And when we get guests like you to come in and like, hey, here's some things you might want to think about. Who's got time to go and read all the release notes?
Yeah.
Well, how dare you ask me to read all of the release notes? So we try to give us a little shortcut, a little TLDR. Here's some things you might want to look out for and keep up with the ecosystem because it does move fast. Not just Spring AI. Everything is moving fast. And if you don't take a little bit of time to stop and listen to what's going on around, it's hard. It's hard to compete. And this market's not very forgiving these days either. So the better we can do to stay on top of things, I think, the better off we'll be. And that's what we're trying to do here. Oh, do you guys know Claude 4 just released? Yeah, I heard that. I heard that as well. There's another conference. Is it called Code Now or something like that? Conference in San Francisco is happening, and they just announced Claude 4 today. So things are happening. It's moving fast, and it's not going to slow down. So yeah, take some time. Make sure you keep on checking in to Spring Office Hours because we'll give you the TLDR and keep you up to date as best we can in the time that we've got. Phil, do you have any last words to celebrate the Spring Boot 3.5 release that's coming any minute now?
Well, I guess I should click the button and actually get it out because I noticed that Dan's already congratulating us. I haven't actually got it out yet, so there's that. No, I'm really looking forward to kind of ramping up on 4.0 now. I think it's going to be really nice to not have the multiple branches that we've got to try and finish off some of the kind of work we've started there. I think that's going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah,
it's going to be, it's exciting times. Can you commit to coming and doing a Spring Boot 4.0 release party with us in November?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yes. It's definitely going to get
You heard
released.
It here, folks. We're going to have another party in just 6 short months to celebrate Spring Boot 4.0.
Of course, it depends on like how much we can get into it. It may just be like basically the same as 3.5 if we mess up, but hopefully we won't.
I get it.
A lot of work that's got to land.
I believe in you. I believe in, and when I say you, I mean the whole team. I believe in you, and we have a great community that believes in you as well. Keep up the great work. Thank you for everything. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody else, if you are in the live stream, you got any last minute questions, feel free to ask. Phil Webb, co-creator of Spring Boot, is here. Thank you so much. Carl says, thank you very much for this information. Great session. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.